Hello, welcome to Kaleidoscope with me, Savithri Rodrigo. Today, April the 23rd, is World English Day, honoring Shakespeare, the wordsmith who gave us swagger, eyeball, gossip, and more than 1,700 everyday words. But English began over 1,400 years ago, evolving through invasions and influences to become today's global language. It's full of quirks. Dreamt is the only word ending in MT. Rhythms has no vowels. Orange still has no rhyme, and 11% of English is just the letter E. Even our meat names, beef, pork, mutton, veal, come from Norman French roots. From the Kaleidoscope studios, Rehana Taufik, the Hakgala Gardens, and news in a blink. I'm sure quite a few of you ventured towards Noor earlier during these holidays and made that short trip to Sri Lanka's second largest botanical gardens, the Hakgala Botanical Gardens. Kaleidoscope Vibe hopped on a buggy, yes, they have those too, and off we went. It is Sri Lanka's misty highland jewel with its name Hakgala, jaw rock, coming from the Ravana legend, tying myth to nature. Established in 1861 by the British to grow cinchona, the source of quinine, it still houses the only publicly viewed cinchona tree today. Over time, Hakgala blossomed into a paradise of more than 10,000 plant varieties. Lilies, orchids, ferns, unique flora, roses and exotic imports, all thriving in its cool mountain climate, constantly maintained by a hard-working team of gardeners and landscape artists. And the results show in all its beauties. What makes Hakgala Gardens unique is this blend of legend, colonial science and breathtaking biodiversity, making it one of Sri Lanka's most enchanting gardens. From YouTube to Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn, Kaleidoscope shines across every feed. Subscribe and follow to get more. With the strength of Selinko Live, CDB and the Daily Morning backing us, we bring you stories that matter.
Cool appetizer. Introducing CDB Self, the digital wallet that makes life easy.
Now, this week's headlines, sharp and straight on CDB News in a blink. Sri Lanka's gross official reserve assets dipped 3.45% in March to $7.01 billion. Sri Lanka's customs records 743 billion rupees in revenue leading up to Aurudu. The World Bank sees Sri Lanka's growth slowing to 3.6% in 2026 amid an energy shock. And now, let's check out our markets this week. Trading on the Colombo Stock Exchange was mostly flat and lackluster, with daily turnover levels dropping below 4 billion rupees. Even though the Strait of Hormuz remained closed, oil prices came down below $90 per barrel this week after the US extended the ceasefire and the market was hopeful for a settlement. And even as oil prices dropped, the price of gold moved back over $4,750 per ounce on renewed buying from central banks. Gamini Sugatadasa won gold for Sri Lanka in the Boston Marathon 55 to 59 age group, finishing in 2 hours 36 minutes and 32 seconds, the fastest time by a Sri Lankan in that category. The Singapore Zoo's first Sri Lankan leopard cubs make their public debut.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Silinco Life.
In a world where over 270 million people live amid conflict zones, the ripple effects reach far beyond borders, reshaping economies, energy security, and everyday lives. What do these global tremors mean for Sri Lanka? On Kaleidoscope Selinko Life Dialogues today, we're joined by Rehana Taufik, co-founder and director, Civic Education at Arutha. Given Sri Lanka's heavy reliance on the Gulf's oil and gas, what contingency strategies do you think are viable if supply disruptions persist the way they are?
So in terms of contingencies, we have already switched and bought oil from different countries like the USA, and India has supplied oil to us as well, and then we are in negotiations with China and Russia. And for gas, our main supplier last year was Oman. They are uniquely not affected by the closure because of their geographic position, but of course prices will rise as shipping and also insurance costs rise as well. Of course, if this persists for many years, then that's a very different situation that we are looking at, and then we're going to have to look at how do we transition our economy to a situation where energy flows are not the same as it is today. So that could mean anything from transitioning our electricity generation to renewable resources like hydro and solar, and also even switching gas consumption away, like for cooking purposes. Instead of using gas, we might have to look at something like induction cooking.
So given our heavy reliance on migrant worker remittances, how can policymakers sort of reshape and prepare for mass repatriations?
Some of our workers in the Gulf are in somewhat precarious job situations. There isn't real job security or protections. There is a risk for migrant workers, and I think the government will really have to step in to support them to transition.
So let's look at fertilizer, which is tied considerably to the Middle East and suppliers. If there are disruptions, what would that do for our agricultural productivity and our food security?
So food security is a major issue, and it's not just a consequence of this war. Actually, if we look at the impacts of the economic crisis, food insecurity increased rapidly. Poverty doubled. Child malnutrition just reversed gains and has been increasing and has remained elevated. And the Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that about 9 million Sri Lankans can't afford a healthy diet. So in this context, it is a major blow, and I think the government must step in and enact a lot of, there are urgent measures and then more medium to long-term measures that we can do to ensure food security.
How is this continuation of the conflict actually going to reshape Sri Lanka's tourism industry?
But Sri Lanka tourism itself has been undergoing some changes in dynamics. For instance, the growth of Indian tourists to Sri Lanka, it grew quite rapidly in the last 2 to 3 years. And there have been, for example, there have been a lot of cultural sites that they like to visit. So we've pivoted towards, say, the Indian market. So now I think those kinds of changes will continue. Unfortunately, it does look like we have to just be very reactionary at this point, but I think again in the long term there has to be a more sustainable plan. Tourism is of course very important, but how do we also look at other sectors and make sure that they're all contributing effectively?
So looking ahead beyond the immediate disruptions, what lessons can be put into place to make sure that we are able to at least weather these future shocks, external shocks that come our way all the time now?
Yes. Let's rely on our structural foundations. Let's rely on the strength of our structure rather than being reactionary. So let's be proactive with the reforms even. Let's not delay. Let's try to do as much as we can. Let's try to ramp up whatever reforms, like for instance with state-owned enterprise reform has been very slow. Now we have just very recently implemented trade reforms like the phasing out of para-tariffs. It's going to take over 3 years, but there has to be commitment across the board from political parties to stick to this reform agenda, because we really can't afford to fall back or to reverse these gains, because ultimately that is going to be the foundation we can rely on.
And we will be back with Kaleidoscope next week, because this is where stories matter.